Hi, I'm Paul Comfort, and this is a great edition of Transit Unplugged. Today, we kick off the first of our two-part series, an interview with Paul Wiedefeld, CEO and General Manager of WMATA, the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority in Washington, D.C., that serves Maryland, D.C., and Northern Virginia, and, of course, the federal government. 40% of the passengers, the million passengers a day on the bus and rail system there, go to jobs with the federal government. So they kind of carry the nation, so to speak. And Paul's been on the job about 2 years now and has one of the toughest jobs in Washington because it impacts so many people. On this two-part episode, the first part, we're going to focus on his background and career, which includes an interesting stint in aviation. And he talks about how some of the lessons he learned as general manager, CEO of BWI Airport in Baltimore, translated into decisions he made for the transit system in Washington, D.C. And we also talk about the current projects he's been on and kind of the state of good repair efforts that have been undergoing there at WMATA for the last couple years. And then in part two of the episode, which will be on a second complete separate episode, we'll talk to Paul about the financing and how they have no dedicated funding source, the governance, some of the new innovations they're doing in paratransit and on fixed route, as well as some new big projects they're working on, the Purple Line and the Silver Line. That'll be on episode number 2 of this two-part series. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of Transit Unplugged with Paul Wiedefeld.
What does it mean to be a successful public transit agency? What are you doing to lead the way? It's time to learn from the top transit professionals in North America. This is Transit Unplugged with your host, Paul Comfort.
I'm Paul Comfort, your host of Transit Unplugged. Great to have you with us today. And today we're with one of the most famous names in transit, Paul Wiedefeld, the Chief Executive Officer, and are you a General Manager? General Manager CEO, of the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority, or WMATA. Paul, great to have you with us.
Nice to see you again, Paul.
Yeah. Paul and I are old friends. We've worked together in previous capacities, which I'm sure will come up during the show. But I was thinking about how to start this episode, and I thought, so there's 3 big things in Washington, D.C., right? There's the federal government, there's the Washington Redskins, and there's WMATA. And would you agree with that?
That is it. In fact, it's only the Redskins and us. For most people. They block that other stuff out.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So I would say Paul probably, I'd like to say this in the past, but I'm not kidding. I think he has basically the hardest job in Washington because actually, out of those 3 things, WMATA actually has more of an impact on the day-to-day lives of the people in this region, probably than the other 2 do combined. So, because certainly the Redskins, who are my team as well, haven't had much of an impact. I got $20 tickets to their last game of the season on the club level. That's how the tickets were going, you know. So, Paul, great to have you with us again, and just tell us a little bit about, we normally like to start with talking about your career. Sure. So you had some background in Maryland, but tell us about your career and how you ended up being CEO of the 4th largest transit system in America.
Sure. My background is I have a planning background, primarily not engineering. And then started out with the Maryland Department of Transportation. Actually went to Rutgers and then did some work up in New Jersey, but then came to Maryland and ran their capital budget, basically. Okay. Capital budgeting program, and it's a very large budget. And then from there, went to the private sector and worked for Parsons Bricker Hall for a number of years. Did a lot of business development and project, managed large projects. And then after that, got a call one day and got seeing if I had any interest in running BWI Airport. So I went to BWI Airport and worked there for a number of years.
How long were you there at BWI?
I was there actually twice.
That's what I thought,
in total 10 years.
Wow.
So we did, basically we took that airport from really the 3rd ranked airport in the Baltimore, Washington region to make it the number 1.
Yeah.
So
wasn't it Friendship? Was it Friendship when you took over?
No, I'm not that old. I'm old. I'm not that old. No, it was BWI. But basically, I got there right after. In fact, I got there right after 9/11. And
wow.
We were the first TSA checkpoint.
Really?
In the country, and that was in March 2002, and I started that week that we opened that. But then we, right from there, as you can imagine, where that industry was at that time.
Yeah.
But then we just took off. We built a huge Southwest terminal there and did a number of other major construction. So anyway, was there, and then went back to PB for a little bit, and then ran their aviation practice, and then got a call and asked if I would go to the MTA in Baltimore, where you were, And I hope I left it in fairly good hands for you when I was there. But there were some people in between.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But anyway, no. So I did that.
I mean, I've told you this before, but everybody loved you. The people that still worked there when I got there
were a good team.
had fond memories of you. Yeah.
So anyway, I was there about 3 years, and then
you beat the average.
That's right.
Because there's been 10 in the last 20 years.
Typical transit, right? But anyway, I was ready to go back to the private sector for the third time. That's when I went back to the airport again.
Okay.
So that was there.
Who asked you to go back there? Was it Jim Smith?
No. Well, it was Secretary John Beccari.
Oh, Beccari. Oh, I love him.
And he became U.S. DOT Deputy Secretary.
He's brilliant, man.
Yeah, no, great guy. And we've always, I mean, we have obviously we have a personal relationship, but it's always just been a professional relationship.
Yeah.
So I've known him through the decades. Anyway, so did that, and then there was a change of politics in the state of Maryland.
I heard that.
Yeah, that's that happens. And then so they wanted to make a change at the airport, and then this job was open, and a number of people suggested I apply for this, and I did that, and then so been here just over 2 years.
So let me ask you, why would you want to come? Why would you want to come to what was then, it's not now, but what was then a very troubled agency?
Obviously, I mean, I grew up in this area, in the Baltimore, Washington area, and so I have, the memories I have of Metro, when I thought of Metro always, was, when you brought someone from out of town to Washington, you took them to the museums, the mall, and Metro.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
and you rode the Metro too, then.
Yeah, and it was but it was part of the adventure.
That's right.
It was literally part of the adventure.
You're right. Yeah.
And so, that's my memory of Metro growing up and, going through young adulthood. And then to see what had happened over the last 10, 15 years to this, both the system, the agency, its reputation, all that was sort of partially what drove it, because I'm committed to this region. I'm committed to public transit. So that was probably the biggest thing. I was very fortunate to have lots of options career-wise. But for this one, to do that, have that opportunity to do that was just so unique.
Yeah.
And there are some personal things. I mean, it was nice to be able to stay close to home and not have to, do the seat 4A all the time, every other week when we do the consulting thing. So anyway, so it was a combination of personal and professional. But really what drove it was just, again, the recognition of what this thing was and how it had slipped, and can we get it back there? And really there's nothing I can do. It's got to be a huge effort to get us there. So that's what drove us back here.
So before we get into all the professional things, personally, how has it been for you the last couple of years here? I mean,
Paul, it's the greatest job I've ever had.
Really?
It is the greatest job
That's
I've
great.
ever had. It's the hardest job I've ever had by far. But in terms of when you see progress, when you see people develop, when you see our credibility, we had lost our credibility in the community, both in the public and elected officials. And to get that back, now we're not there. We have a long way to go. But to even get us moving in that direction, particularly, I'm sure you're going to get into some of the issues we're dealing with finance. When I came in, there was no way I could have ever brought up, let's talk about funding issues here.
Yeah.
People would just look at me like, are you, what planet are you from? So we had to rebuild the credibility that, we were managing the thing correctly, that we had their interests at heart, the customer and the financial people that are funding us, and that's what was driving our decisions. So once we got beyond that, then we could start to have that dialogue. So
you've earned kind of the credibility to do that.
I think, the agency has and in my world, I've got to do it at 4 different levels. I've got to do it in the district, I've got to do it in the Commonwealth of Virginia, I've got to do it in the state of Maryland.
That's true.
And I've got to do it up on Capitol Hill and with the administration.
Wow.
So that's just the nature of our environment here.
So when you walked in 2 years ago, what did you walk into? What was the situation when you got here 2 years ago?
Probably what a lot of other transit agencies that have gone through, similar tough times. You had an organization that was silo-based, and communication was terrible, and accountability was not there. Everyone was protecting their own particular interests and not accountability to the agency or to our mission. So that was a large part of it. Then, like other transit agencies, particularly heavily unionized transit agencies, a very discipline-based structure that, again, just doesn't get you to your mission. It gets you to, a discipline-based attitude and approach to things. So all those things. Then, again, as I mentioned, the lack of credibility in the public and in the media, and we have, tremendous media here that I have, I think at last count, 4 beat reporters from the Post, that's
Really?
what they do.
Yeah.
And so we get a lot of attention. Again, it gets back to this Redskins Metro thing is something that everyone in the region can relate to. And that's just the reality of it. So anyway, that was the whole mix.
Plus you had some, wasn't there, when you got here, they had just had an incident on something.
Yeah, a year before we had a tragedy where one of our customers passed away.
Right.
So we were, again, all of that was leading into our lack of credibility. But also we had not, our safety culture had slipped tremendously. So we started a whole new way of thinking about that, which is basically, literally I had to get every one of our managers, we have about 13,000 people here, about 1,800 of them are management, non-rep employees. Literally, we had to get together in a very large venue and had to say, look, what we're about is safety, and safety trumps service. So, as you're aware of in this business, generally it's make the line. It's
right.
Get the service out there,
right,
no matter what. Mm-hmm. Well, we said no, we're not going to do that. We're going to be safe,
which is a really change,
and it is, and that is something that built up over time. And I felt it at MTA, the same pressures.
Yeah.
And it's not that people they're doing it because they know they've got customers out there waiting for them.
Right.
They're dependent upon them. So they're trying to do that. And obviously they understand the political pressures and things like that. But at the end of the day, that's really what they're trying to do. They're trying to serve the customer. But you can't do that at the risk of their safety. So that's where we had to change all that. So that's sort of the lay of the land.
That's what you walked into. So I got to tell you, seriously, from a third person perspective, I think that what you did by changing the culture here at WMATA really has led the way for the whole transit industry in America to change that viewpoint to safety first. I remember when you and I both shut down for which Jonas.
Storm. Oh,
yeah, the winter storm. It's the first time I think WMATA had ever done it, shut down completely.
Blizzard,
and we did it. I followed your lead. We talked over the phone at MTA in Baltimore. And then Philly and New York followed us. And right before that, Boston had a terrible situation with the storm, which made everybody think, hey, maybe we need to change our approach. And that,
Paul, I learned that or got to that way of thinking at the airport.
Okay.
Aviation, as you can imagine, the importance of safety at an airport. But even then, when I was there, we had back-to-back storms one year, major storms, 20, 24 inches. And I went to Southwest Airlines. And historically, and you think about airports 15 years ago, when there were storms coming, we literally had cots, thousands of cots, because people would come, the planes would be delayed and or canceled, and they'd sleep in the terminal. And I went to the leadership at Southwest. I said, guys, now we can do that again. Or maybe we just pull down service. You let me get out there. We can get this thing cleared so much quicker and cleaner rather than working around all your stranded aircraft all over the place. Just pull down the service, let me get it out, and I'll guarantee you by some time that we'll reopen, and then everyone can stay at home.
Right, and not in
your
airport.
Rebook on their computers, and then they can come in the next day. And literally, we went from thousands of people in the terminal. We'd have like a half a dozen.
Wow.
And, or dozen. That's what we did. And then the whole business, if you look at major storms now, that's what they do. Because from a business perspective, it makes a ton of sense for them.
Yes.
Because, their most valuable asset is that aircraft. And if it's locked in somewhere in snow and stuff, it doesn't make money. So they were better off just putting them somewhere else and bringing them in. So that was sort of the same mentality that when we shut down, you and I, it was the same thing. Now, I can try to run these trains. I can put these bus operators out there in 2 foot of snow trying to move a 40 foot. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And what I found was, I'm sure you found it up there, and I was here, I had been, 2 months here, whatever it was. And you were
a bold move.
You were pretty new too.
Yeah, it was.
And I remember the biggest thing I got back was from the internal, our people. Yes. Our bus operators. And they were like, finally, someone gets it. Yep. They don't understand. They just think we can just magically get to work. We can move these buses around. There's no way.
Right.
And you're trying to serve people that can't even they're standing out in the street. It's just it's unsafe for everybody.
Yeah.
And so that probably got me more credibility internally than externally. But then, as you know, in March, we had to shut down the system for a whole day because of a safety issue. Yeah. And then obviously that got a whole nother level of attention.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that then. So we talked about changing kind of a cultural, traditional viewpoint in transit, which is service comes first. And so you made a cultural change which said no, safety comes first, and then you demonstrated it by shutting down for a storm when you were only here 2 months, and then a couple months later, what'd you do?
Shut down the entire system. We had a situation on a Monday morning at 5 a.m. right before we opened, with a cable that literally caught fire, electrical cable in the third rail, a jumper cable, and so basically it was fairly typical day, because this when things happen in the system, what do you do? You try to get the thing back up and running as quick as you can. This is right before rush hour. It's one of our busiest transfer points. So that's what we're doing. So the whole focus was on that from the operations side. My focus was not on that. My focus is on explain to me what happened and where's this risk else? Where else in the system is this risk? Mm-hmm. So that was my focus. So the operations people are doing what they do. The police are doing what they do. Stationed, all those. We got all these resources. We're providing, shuttle buses and all that stuff. That's all going on in the background that morning and into that day. My head the whole time was like, but where am I exposed to this same thing happen somewhere else? So it got to the point where, but I had to let people do what they did too on the operations side. We had to get ready for evening rush. Yes. And again, service is driving most of the decision. My head is more on the, are we safe? So it got to the point where I said, okay, guys, get through the rush hour. Let's regroup around 9 o'clock that night. I actually went home, had dinner with my wife. Because I needed, in the back of my head already was like, I do not feel comfortable, and unless they convince me that this thing is safe, I'm going to shut it down. So that had already creeped into my head. Okay. And I hadn't said anything to anybody. Yeah. And so I went home, and basically I was really to go home and speak to my wife about it. And I bounced it back and forth with her a little bit. And then at the end of the dinner, I said to her, well, I got to get back to the office. I said, but tomorrow's either going to be my shortest day on the job or my longest.
That's great, man.
Because if I go this way, either I'm going to be fired or we're going to keep going like crazy. So anyway, we got back at 9 o'clock, and I just couldn't get there. But they were saying, well, you can't do it, and all the different reasons why this doesn't make sense. And a lot of it was around, this is so dramatic, and this will have ramifications of reputation and things of that sort. And I got that. I understood. And I understood what it meant to this region. Right. Sure. Literally the economy.
How many passengers a day?
About 1 million a day. Wow. So we're doing 1 million passengers, and the federal government depends upon us. Yeah. When there's snow, they ask us, are we open? Because if we're not open, they're shutting down. Okay. So that was, I got all that. But I still kept getting back to the point was, all right, walk me back from this ledge. Mm-hmm. Show me where I don't have this situation before. And by that time, we knew enough about the situation that caused the fire. And I said, well, how many other locations are there like this? And I couldn't get an answer. Mm. And I kept pushing that and pushing that and pushing that. And so we knew more and more details what caused it, but I didn't know where else could this pop up. So then I said, okay, continue to get the operations right, but you need to create a backup plan that if we shut this thing down, what are we going to do to find out where we have other situations like this? So we had a whole nother crew then was working on that. So the engineers out of that. So anyway, so the next, 24 hours, a little bit more than 24 hours later, we got back together. We had a whole game plan of how we're going to inspect every jumper cable in the system. Okay. And we're going to log it. We brought in consultants or contractors and our own people. And 2 o'clock the next day, we announced that we would be shutting down for a day until we did this. We did it, and we found like 3 other situations that literally we would have shut down the system if we'd known they were there, and we just didn't know they were there. So we were riding service with deteriorated power cables that at any second could have done. Yeah.
And how old is the system?
The system's 40 years old, 42 years old now. Yeah. So anyway, that clearly set. Just externally, as you can imagine, presented lots and lots of challenges. But I think that what I heard since then, and at that time, actually, from the customers and from our employees, okay, we're serious about safety now. We're really serious now. That doesn't mean there's tremendous pressure to keep the thing open. I mean, we all deal with.
But you still ran buses that day, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we did. But I mean, the reality, we do about 600,000 when we're out about 400,000 on buses.
Okay.
So our buses at peak period, they're pretty much maxed out.
Yeah,
so
they're already
there wasn't
filled, yeah.
a whole lot we could do
Okay.
to do there. What happened was the federal government gave everyone liberal leave,
Okay.
treated it almost as a snow event, and literally, I mean, the town was maybe 30% full.
Yeah.
You walked around, it was a little like a Saturday morning, Sunday morning
Right.
type feel. So
that was almost like a kickoff of what became a longer campaign, so to speak, right? So
Right.
for the next couple minutes, tell us about what you've been doing. You've had a couple phases of this campaign, and tell us where you're
Sure.
at now on this overall.
So we
state
left
of good
there,
repair.
and so we said, okay, well, this is the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
So I went to our particularly our track and power people and our operations people. I said, look, you all need to tell me what would it take to get this system just to the point where we feel it's safe. Not fix everything.
Right,
Just get me to the point where we say, okay, now we can start to really focus on getting this system right. So we came up with this thing called Safe Track, which is we had to squeeze 3 years worth of work, of planned work in the future, into 1 year. And literally we had about 20% of our ties were deteriorated, particularly our wooden ties, were just deteriorated. So we were running trains, and trying to keep up, but we were behind by over 3 years. So we brought that down to 2% that now we can manage and work. So we did 3 years worth of work in 1 year, about $165 million worth of work around the clock. We had to shut down 16 different parts of the line, either total closures or single tracking, bus bridges, you name it. We had literally we had to beg our customers not to use us because it was just we could not meet it. So that was extremely difficult for the community, for the users, and for the political side, but had to be done. So from that we went to we basically then restricted hours, and we created a preventive maintenance inspection program, which we had never had in 40 years.
Wow.
So now we go out and we do measuring, for instance, of cables, and we can send power through there and see where it's leaking instead of waiting for it to leak and causing a fire, and then say, okay, now let's go fix it.
Yeah.
We're trying to get ahead of it in non-revenue time. So we got some more hours to get out there and work, and then we created this PMI program. So we got a 2-year window to do that from the board. That gives us 2 years to restrict the hours so we can catch up. So that's going on. And then the other thing we did is, all right, well, that's fine for, it's almost inside baseball. That's what we do. But then from the customers, how do we start to bring them back? So we did a lot of focus groups and things of that sort. And we created this program called what we call the Back to Good program, which was really interesting. The term, and we take some heat on the term, back to good, but
making Mamata great again.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it was interesting. That term is literally from our customers.
Okay.
They gave us that.
They want you to
brand.
get back to being good.
They basically said, look, do not tell us. We know this. We're not stupid.
Right.
We've been around here for decades. We use it every day. We've seen this deterioration. Did not happen overnight. Just start to bring us back. Get us to good. Yes, great. We want to be where we were in 1976.
Right.
But you're not going to get us there, and don't tell us you're going to do that, because you're not.
Very realistic.
They're very real because they deal with everything.
Right.
So that's what created it. And that's focusing on particularly on the customer experience. So what we did there is we focused on getting our new series of rail cars out. This is particularly on the rail side. Get our new series called the 7,000 series. Mm-hmm. We had 1,000 series, which were 40 years old. The NTSB said you have to get them out of the system because they're dangerous from an accident, 15 years ago. Literally, we had to belly them in between other car series because they were unsafe to be at the front or the back.
Wow.
So, that's how drastic it was. So we were getting roughly 8 cars a month through our vendor, Kawasaki. So we put a lot of focus on that, brought in them and brought in their senior leadership and said, look, we've got to get this. The contract called between 12 and 16. So we basically got up to 20 cars per month. And we've done that for about a year now. So we have 748 of them ordered. We have almost 500 on property. We were able to get the 1,000s out of the system a year sooner. We were get out of another set of cars that had problems, got them out of the system, which would cause all these other customer problems, offloads, things of that sort. So because of that, we started being much more reliable. So now we moved to the point where we're 90% of our service is on time. And we actually came out a month ago with the board allow us to do what we call the rush hour promise, which is basically if it takes you more than 15 minutes to do what should be your average trip, then we will not charge you. We will automatically credit you have to sign up for our smart card, but we'll automatically credit. You don't have to do a thing. The next day we apologize to you, and within 5 business days, it's credited back to your account.
That's awesome.
So that's all because we've been focused on this back to good part. And there's lots of other things, whether it's cleaning stations, lighting, and the other major focus is on safety, personal safety.
Okay.
So we've had our lowest crime rate since 2005. We've driven that down
more than a
about
decade. That's great.
Yeah, by 19%. Part one, the serious crime.
I just was talking to your chief Pavlik out there. I mean, you
no,
guys are rocking, huh?
We got a great chief, and we put a lot of focus, and it's everything. We've increased our fair enforcement initiative again to get more revenue, but also to set the tone a little bit. So we've like quadrupled the number of citations we're doing there and stops. But I want our police officers to say, no, this is the way that we do business.
How many police officers do you have in your system?
We have just under 500.
Okay. So do you feel like you've turned the corner service-wise?
I think all the needles are pointing in the right direction.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
But we still have a long way to go. We have a lot more to do on the bus side and on the rail side. So I don't want to. I'm never going to get there.
Right.
We're always going to push. But yes, the needles are all pointing the way, and
good.
Because of that, now we can start to talk about some of these larger issues.
Right. Well, we're going to cut it there for the first part of a 2-part series we're doing with an interview with Paul Wiedefeld. Our total interview ran close to an hour long, so we decided to break this into 2 episodes. Hope you enjoyed this look at his background, career, and the extensive insight into the projects to try to improve state of good repair. One thing you may have heard Paul refer to in his comments were how he handled a storm called Winter Storm Jonas. We actually worked on that together. I was head of the MTA in Baltimore at the time. He was in Washington, D.C. Our systems interlined and had connecting service through the MARC commuter train service, Maryland Area Regional Commuter Train Service that hauls about 40,000 passengers a day down to Union Station. And so we both decided at that storm, which was January, February, a couple of years ago, to basically shut down service completely. And when we both decided to do it, it was the first time ever that WMATA had shut down for a storm, the 4th time in Baltimore. And we were able to, in Baltimore, get service back up within 96 hours, full service. And it was it ended up being the largest dumping of snow in Maryland in one storm in history. So we talk about that and how that kind of set the stage for what he did next. Paul was a great help to me when I first came to Baltimore. He was head of BWI Airport when I was at MTA. And he kind of took me around, showed me the airport, explained to me how the whole MDOT system worked, the Maryland Department of Transportation, with its kind of unique structure. No other state in America handles it quite that way, with 6 different modes under one Department of Transportation funded through a trust fund, which is gas tax and some corporate income tax, and kind of walked me through the structure and the political structure and nature of things. And then he went on out of BWI and ended up at WMATA, where we continued to work together kind of hand in glove with regular conversations. Good guy. He's actually a great guy. I think I can't think of anyone better who could handle this major system in Washington, D.C. and the issues they've been having. And you'll hear about how he handles the financing, the governance, and some new innovations coming on the next episode, which will be part 2 of our extensive interview with Paul Wiedefeld, which I conducted at his office at the Jackson Graham Building in downtown Washington, D.C. I'm Paul Comfort. Thanks for being with us today. Make sure that you stay tuned for the next episode, which will air in about 15 days. Thanks.
You've been listening to Transit Unplugged, powered by Trapeze Group. To stay up to date, subscribe on iTunes or Google Play, or join the conversation at transitunplugged.com. Thanks for listening.